Don't seek after the weak and wild. Instead, seek after the meek and mild. Welcome, everybody, to the channel. Welcome back to every one of you who's watched before, and welcome to first-time viewers. I hope you're doing well, and hope that you're having a wonderful day whenever you're watching this. So this video, I want to talk about this quote of mine that I just mentioned, that I just quoted. I'm someone who loves rhymes, so being able to rhyme within my quotes is always enjoyable. It's a good mixture of quote and poetry, so I like it. But anyway, but this one is very pertinent in the sense that it's very relatable. If we just do some thinking and cataloging, right, and introspection on our relationships and our environments that we're in, it's incredible, really, how often we can find if we're right seeking after weak and wild people in situations or meek and mild people in situations, right? Mhm. So there's four verses from the Bible that I want to highlight off this particular topic and this particular thought, and then I'll elaborate on some of the points and examples I have to make as well. So in Matthew chapter 5 and verse 5, it's a very short verse, but one that is somewhat commonly known, at least to my experience and my understanding. And it says, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." So now we have to make a little bit of a qualification or a little bit of a we have to have a bit of an understanding of exactly what is meek, um, what's mild, what's weak, what's wild, right? So what is meek? Who are the meek, and why are they going to inherit the earth? So meek slash meekness is really just it's the what's the word here? It's essentially it's the attitude, it's the atmosphere, it's the personality, it's the um, character of someone in most cases, or at least environment, right? Who or what is just very calm, demure, not explosive, not just devoid of discipline, right? Very tender, considerate, very thoughtful. Um, has good discernment and is generally focused, compassionate, loving, right? Not boasting about themselves, not boisterous, not loud, not egregious in activities and speech and all this stuff, right? Now, some people might look at meek and say, well, because they're not maybe as maybe cutthroat or as demonstrative as other people or other environments, that they are therefore weak, which is actually the complete inverse. Because weak is people who think they're strong but don't realize that they actually have no firm foundation. The reason why the meek inherit the earth is because the meek are humbled. They have humility, right? And they, especially in a biblical and spiritual context, they're humbled before Christ. They're humbled to be before God, by God. And as such, they inherit the earth, especially after Jesus comes again, right? Because when there's a new heaven and a new earth, when you're humbled before your creator and you're living a life to please him, you're serving him, you're worshiping him, you're aligned with him and filled with his spirit, then you're meek and you're not weak because you have a foundation. Your foundation is tied to the whole reason we all are here, right? The whole reason why this entire planet and Earth exists, the reason why all creation exists. But when you're weak, you have no foundation of that. You're weak because you just kind of whatever you want to do, you do. Whatever you feel you want to do, you do. And that we can justify that in our heads on a just a humanity level, right? And in our own flesh and vain desires. But those don't stand up to the test of time because they always just completely ebb and flow. They have no firm consistency about them, right? And because of that, you become wild in your actions and your desires and your thoughts, right? How you go about things and how you desire and pursue things. And as such, God doesn't respect that, doesn't honor that, right? Because you're not humbled. You're not, seeking after Him who's created all things and who's Lord of all. And when you're meek and when you're mild, right? You're mild, you have mild temperance. You're not given to lashing out with anger and malice and strife and all of these things, right? So the meek are blessed, and they will inherit the earth. So that's the distinction we've got to look right at and understand the comparison between it. So just because you're meek or someone is meek does not mean that they are weak because they're still willing to stand on something. But what they're willing to stand on is the foundation that's been not man-made, but God-made, right? So, so that's the first verse there. The next verse I want to highlight is Ephesians 4 verses 14. All right, and that says that we henceforth be no more children, tossed to and fro, and carried about with every wind of doctrine, by the sleight of men and cunning craftiness, whereby they lay. Sorry, whereby they lie in wait to deceive. So the whole idea is when you're like I already pre-established, right? Established previously. When you're weak and wild, again, you're like that because you have no foundation. Because you were like a child, right? Who is just who has no discipline, has no firm foundation, has no understanding of okay, you know, what am I ascribing myself to be, right? Because you're absorbing everything. You're going about irrationally, in a lot of cases, what you believe, what you desire, what you like, what you don't, all this kind of stuff, right? So you're tossed to and fro. You're carried about with every wind of doctrine, right? And you know, when you stray from the written word of God, right? Inspired word of God, right? When you're not submitted to Him, when you're not committed to Him, when you don't desire a relationship with God, right? So you're not humble to Him, you're not meek and mild, you're weak and wild, and you're just going to kind of give ear to whatever doctrine, whatever wind of doctrine that's a perversion or a distortion of sorts that makes you feel better about yourself, that makes you feel better about where you're at in life, makes you feel better about the sin that we're doing and, you know, the lives that we're living that are not according to Christ, but are, essentially that we're able to justify our wrongs, we're able to justify our lives for good, for bad, for indifferent, or for whatever desires we want, right? But that's us being children. That's us being weak and wild because we have no established ground, right? We have no established understanding of exactly what it is that we're pursuing and where we're supposed to go. And when that happens, then as we continue to grow and as we are adults ourselves, we become very easily, right, deceived by the sleight of men, right? People who desire cunning craftiness in terms of fables and how, oh, this is the truth, or, and not that, or this is this and that, and right? But it always switches, right? So if you're not founded on the truth, and there can only be one truth in all of that all humanity is subject to, all of creation is subject to. If you're trying to convince yourself or others of another truth, that's slight, that's deception, that's trying to be craftiness and trying to appeal to the humanity in the flesh and say, hey, you know, this is better, this is more, pleasant to the ears, right? But when we're pursuing after people and places that give air to that type of environment and that type of, you know, doctrine and whatnot, it's an incredibly weak foundation because that will crumble because that eventually will change. What you're convinced of one day you will not be convinced of some other day if you're not grounded in actual truth. So, so that's the verse I want to highlight for that part. Next verse is Colossians 3, chapter 12. All right. Put on therefore, as the elect of God, holy and beloved, bowels of mercies, kindness, humbleness of mind, meekness, long suffering. Now here's the thing. Those who are weak and wild generally don't hit any of these points, or at least don't do them anywhere near consistently, right? When you're weak and wild, which really means is you're just all over the place. Excuse me. You're not disciplined, you're not focused and diligent in things. You're generally not going to be kind because you're going to be brash, you're going to be arrogant, you're going to be, abrasive and everything. And so you're not going to be kind, you're not going to have as much mercy as someone who's just meek and mild, who's humbled, right? And again, he says humbleness of mind, right? Right? You're not going to be humbled if you don't, you know, if you don't seek truth, if you don't desire a relationship with the one who's created you, who can humble your mind. Because if you're not seeking after Christ, after, the one who created us in that, in a relationship in a higher power, then you're never going to be truly humbled because you're going to go off of what man does and what man makes. And when you compare yourself to fallen creation, there's no need to be humble. Because sure, other people can have more power, more authority, more skills, experience, whatever you want to say, right, than you in certain regards for us, right? But at the same time, you also know those people are still capable of doing wrong, doing ill, and and as such, you know that you're going to be stronger than them in certain capacities, and therefore you have no need to be humble of whatever they say or suggest or whatever you do or they do or say. You have absolutely no no reason to be humble in mind. But when you know, look to God, right? When you desire to have a relationship with Him, when you pursue after Him, you would inevitably have to be humbled because He is perfect, and none of us can say and go to Him and say, yeah, we can be humble of ourselves. No, no, we're never humble in ourselves, right? We're humbled by, by God, who is perfect, who's created us, who's formed us, who's made us for His glory, for His honor, right? And when we're humbled like that, as I mentioned before, we can become meek. But also, too, what's interesting is when it comes to the point of long suffering, that's a sign of you being meek and mild. Because when you're weak and wild, you are unwilling or unable to deal with long suffering. You're unable to, and I'm not just talking about like physical pain or something like that. That does tie into it to some degree, but long suffering just means you are being patient. that you are being, you're seeing people struggling, or you're struggling yourself, or whatever it might be, in a variety of different aspects, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially, anything really, right? And you're being long suffering, you're abiding by someone, you're abiding with someone, or in a situation to see it out, right? You're not forcing a solution based on your own desires, based on your own fleshly inherited bias. And when you're weak and wild, right? I said you're not given to long suffering because why? You're like, I don't want to suffer. I don't deserve to suffer. I don't believe I should. Why should I? Why would I want to? Here's the thing, though. None of us want to long suffer. Inherently, it's just not in our flesh to do it. We don't like pain. We don't like trials and tribulations. We don't like to have to wait for things that we feel we desire or feel we deserve. But that's when you're meek and mild, you understand that that's something you have to do. And you become open and receptive to it because when you're humbled, you become meek. And long suffering is a part of that. Long suffering is, right? Right? It is a, fruit of the spirit. So, and then finally, in final verse I want to have here is James 3:13. It says, "Who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom." So, in our world nowadays, there's two types of wisdom. There's spiritual and godly inspired wisdom that comes from God, the creator of all things, including wisdom. And there's also man-made wisdom, right? Wisdom that we ascribe to men and things like philosophers and people who think quite often in the world and delve heavily into things, right? And some of that earthly wisdom isn't necessarily bad. It has some merit, but again, if it's not directly aligned with pursuing after the wisdom of Christ, then that wisdom ends up becoming vacant and just fairly vain, really. So again, you are known to be wise not because another man or a society or a group of people thinks that you're wise. You're wise if you are humbled before Christ, but if you are meek, if you are mild, right? Because when you're weak and wild, you're just going to assume that your wisdom is innate from yourself, your wisdom is innate from other people. No, you can learn things from other people and you can gain insight and you can even gain certain aspects of earthly wisdom. However, right, having that knowledge and having that wisdom is come from, like I said in the shows here, having a good conversation. People who are weak and wild, honestly, in most cases, don't have good conversation and don't show works of meekness, right? Because they're wild. Their speech is profane, is vain, is really not tied to any sort of understanding, of diligence, of love, of compassion, right? Because they're just given to the first thought that comes to their mind, they just throw it out. And it's usually carnal, right? We're all prone to that. Every one of us has been prone to that at different points in our lives. All right. Some more than others, depending on where our relationship with God is and what else we surround ourselves with, right? But we're gonna be well, who we surround ourselves with as well determines exactly how we understand if we're meek and mild or weak and wild. Right? So we have to seek after the people and the places that as well are calm. They're going to provide us peace. You're not going to get that from people who have no foundation. You're not going to get that from people who are just given to whatever comes to their mind or whatever, because it's like it's like playing ping pong. You're back and forth. You don't have any sort of, you know, consistency in being stable in somewhere because you're just constantly bouncing back and forth to a separate area on different thoughts, different desires, ambitions, beliefs, whatever it might be. So, so you want to focus on that. Let me use an example of you know weak and wild in a more of a generalized context. Um, let's say you're in a relationship and um, you're you're in one or you're pursuing one, and your partner is just throwing themselves at you, desiring to have sexual intimacy and relations right off the hop. Let's say you're not even married yet. You've hardly started dating, if that, right? And then you know somebody like that or anyone in that context is usually more weak and wild because they're not given any sort of discipline or any sort of respect to a relationship. Because yes, sexual intimacy is a huge part of a relationship, but it's also a gift from God for each of us to have that, and it's a severe um, it's a great blessing to have a fruitful, intimate relationship with another person, right? But again, that has to be respecting the confines of how God created us. And just to go about and say, "Oh, I want to have sex with whoever I want and whenever I want and do all this kind of stuff," no, that's weak and wild because you have no backbone, right? You have no um, appreciation or respect for the other people that you're interacting with because you're just going off your carnal desires, right? To pleasure yourself, to pleasure someone else for the moment, and then go from there. But also that sexual intimacy ties with people, right? When you have sex with someone, no matter how much you love them, like them, don't care for them, do whatever, right? It ties you to someone because it's an intimate act, right? It's not supposed to be had of everyone and all these people. It's why it's supposed to be confined to the aspect of marriage. But anyways, so that's one example, and then another one, like I previously mentioned just a little bit too, was in speech, right? People who are constantly, you know, using profane language and perverse kind of speech and all this kind of stuff, right? Let's say again, we're all given to it. We've all done it to certain degrees in life. We've all kind of are susceptible to it, but um, there are those who are much more given to it, and that's showing that you're weak and wild, that you're not meek and mild, right? Because you're just given to whatever comes in your mind, carnality, whatever else. You're not really concerned with how it's perceived. You're not really concerned with how it comes across because you just don't care. And you know, there's a lot of other examples that fall in line with those examples I gave, right? And there's a lot of other environments and situations that you can, you know, kind of exact or correlate with it. But that's the general concept. So, right, I just want to encourage us today to, right, focus on, okay, who are we surrounding ourselves? What environments are we putting ourselves in? Are we around people who are weak and wild? Because if we are, that influences us, right? It can deteriorate us, right? In terms of if we are a bit more meek and mild at first, then we allow ourselves to be around people and influenced by and interact with them on a consistent basis. Because then it just, again, it detracts from who we should be and what we're supposed to be striving towards. So, like I said, when you're meek and mild, you're humble before Christ, there are blessings because of that, right? There is a strong relationship with our Creator. Yes, you're still going to have many times in life where there's going to be unpleasantness, where there's going to be trials and tribulations, because you're never promised an easy life. Even as a, um, a person who's faithful to God, you're still not guaranteed a perfect life here on earth. You are afterwards, though, if you maintain that faith, if you continue to grow in Him, and you continue to, again, be long suffering, you be patient, right? You're humble, you're kind, you're giving mercy, right? All this kind of stuff. So, so yeah, just yeah, I just want to highlight this and just encourage all of us to be careful, right? To be very aware. First and foremost, are we being meek and mild, or are we weak and wild? And who are we surrounding ourselves with? Who are we pursuing after? What environments are we entertaining and engaging in? To do active reflection and to bring that all subject to God and say, "Hey, help me. Am I in a good spot? If I'm not, help me. Align me more with you and your will and your word." And God honors and respects the humility because when He humbles us, and we respect that, we humble ourselves before Him, not just to ourselves. Um, there are great rewards that come from that. So, so I just want to thank everybody for watching through this video. Appreciate all of you who've come through at any point in time to watch, even whether it's been a few seconds, a few minutes, or full videos. I appreciate it very much. If you enjoy these kind of videos, feel free to leave a like or a comment. Uh, just allows me to know that this is having sort of an impact. Appreciate that. If you want to see more of these kind of videos and other videos I have down the pipeline, feel free to subscribe onto this channel, turn on notifications as well, so that you're alerted to whenever I post a new video. And yeah, just again, thank you for watching. I hope that you guys are all blessed and that you guys have growth in all areas of your life, right? Spiritually, emotionally, physically, financially, everything, right? Um, and yeah, just again, thank you for your investment into what I do, but also your investment to all the things that you guys do that are in righteous amounts. So until next time, be faithful, right? Be fruitful and be fulfilled. All right. Love you guys. See you later. Bye.